Survivor's Guide to True Crime includes discussions of sexually based violence and is not intended for children. Information provided should not be used as a substitute for professional medical or legal advice. Please exercise discretion and self-care. Welcome back to Survivor's Guide to True Crime. I'm Kim.
And I am Kara.
Welcome to Season 2.
Guys, we're back! Oh my god. It's so good. So good to be back.
We have one extra human now in tow.
So nice to be back and not be impregnated.
That seemed graphic.
You know, so funny haha story. My husband, before I got pregnant, I was like, hey, what do you think about the idea of having a baby? And of course I said this when we were like on the way to close on our land, you know, like really good timing on my part. I'm like, what do you think about having a baby? And he's like, that sounds like the worst possible thing that could possibly happen to us right now. And I was like, oh, okay. And so then I like kicked rocks for a couple days. And then I'm pretty sure I talked about this last season. And then I went to him and I was like, hey, I think that if we didn't do this, I would regret it in 10 years. And so then we were like, oh, let's see what happens. And then I got pregnant immediately. Yay. And now we have like this amazing, perfect little baby. And he's like, so do you want to just have a couple more? And I'm like, no. I'm like, do you not remember that I've been disabled? Like literally couldn't get out of bed for 3 months. Like, do you not remember that part? And he's like, yeah, but she's just so good. And don't you want to keep going? I'm like, my uterus is 37 years old and is tar, boss. I don't think so.
It's a hard no for me. Let's have this conversation because I meant to ask you about this when we were talking a little bit ago and I waited because
it's content.
So you were saying something about the fact that she's a girl and you feel like this parent journey has been you healed and it's a little different.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's because you're healed or because she's a girl? Because I have thoughts and I want to hear yours first.
I mean, how do you extrapolate one from the other? Like, they're not mutually exclusive things. I don't know how to answer that. That's like when people ask me, how did your kidnapping change your parenting? I'm like, I don't know, because I wasn't a parent before. Mm-hmm. So I think it's probably a little bit of both. I know that when I started healing and I stopped dissociating about everything, I realized that I have a lot of feelings. Like, I cry like a baby over everything all the time. And so I think that I feel feral over her. Like, that is the best description of how I'm like, I'm so obsessed with her. And I don't remember feeling that with my boys. So I think that is a little bit because she's a girl, but I think it's also partially because I'm healing. What are your thoughts on it though?
So I can only speak from my own experience. I grew 2 children myself, even though I have 4. So for some people out there, they were confused about that before. My oldest is a boy. A year and a half later, almost to the day, I had my girl. And I didn't notice a difference in how I parented them that had anything to do with gender. Mm-hmm. Probably, it was a few years. Mm-hmm. Like years. Their preferences, like, cool, I bought some pink things instead of blue, whatever.
Right.
But it wasn't like they were interested in different things. It wasn't.
Right.
I don't think it was any different. It wasn't until I started seeing things that my daughter would do, like that I know about myself, where I was like, ooh, but a lot of the things that my son does are more closely aligned with me and how I am. So I was just thinking through this, and obviously my very young childhood journey for them was extremely different than what you're doing now. And I don't know. I would just keep thinking about that. 'Cause like, it's different because it's a girl. And I'm like, I think really don't discount all of the work that you've done and the situation that you're in, because I think that's what you're feeling the biggest difference over. And you have 2 older boys who are also feral over her and protecting
the whole family, even the dog. Like everyone, like I think it was this morning when she woke up and she came downstairs and we were literally all at the table and we were like, oh my God, hey, like talking to her. And And like our favorite thing in the world is when she wakes up in the morning and the first time she sees our faces. And she just gets this big, gigantic grin. So then we were talking about how and my husband was like, well, we always have to do this to her. And then we were laughing about like, my oldest is 10 years older than her. And then my middle child is 7.5 years older than her. And so I was like, yeah, when she's a teenager and you guys don't even live here, you're going to like drive over at 6 o'clock in the morning and be like, good morning. They were like, yeah. And when she's getting married, I was like, oh my God. So like, we're all kind of feral about her. I think there's a lot to be said too about also having a baby that is a girl when you're older, when you're living in this, I mean, my life, I eat, drink, and breathe this like survivor, healing, self-care mentality. So I think that makes a difference too. I mean, there's just so many things that are different. When you have your first kid, you don't know what the hell you're doing. No. Everything's terrifying. And when people when well-meaning older ladies are like, enjoy it. It's like, I don't know how, because we were just talking like, oh, you're constantly afraid the baby is not breathing. Like, yeah. So, and then with my second, I was very much like in a form of trauma too, because my husband was gone all the time. I was in survival mode. So I think there's a lot to unpack about why I feel so different, but she is just doing so many things for my healing. And I don't want to put that on her shoulders. I will never try to put that on her shoulders, but she has been the impetus for like a new level of self-awareness and healing and really parenting. Like I'm finding myself even parenting my boys differently than I did before. And part of that's because I feel like I was gone. I feel like I was checked out for a year because I was just so out of it.
Yeah. Which, I mean, we all go through different parts where we can look back and be like, ooh, I wasn't the best parent in my own mind. But how much of that do kids really see, or do they? I mean, they have to know on some level, but at the same time, like, we are especially hard on ourselves as parents and don't grant ourselves that grace. And I always think it's funny when like my parents will tell stories about when we were kids and I didn't realize like, hey, we're having these dinners based on what's on sale at the grocery store or the coupons that could be clipped. Whereas I'm just like, we get breakfast for dinner. And it was the best day ever, every day. And I had no idea. But that's just because they're not putting that on kids. That's something they're discussing with other adults. Like you and I are here. That's not something that you're going to put on your daughter, but it is something that you can at least recognize and talk about. And that alone is growth.
And like, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about the same thing. I love those kind of stories where, you know, like to you, these memories were magical and your parents were like, well, that was because we were struggling.
Right.
Like, and think about like, are we talking about money specifically too much around my kids? Mm-hmm. And the answer is yes, but it's because my kids are so nosy. Like, they're like, what are you talking about? And there's really, especially my oldest, he's so like, y'all, I'm nosy. I'm nosier than probably any other human in the world. Like, I need to know all the things that are going on all the time.
Low stakes drama, just like we were just saying. Like, I am super invested in this drama that has nothing to do with me and is very low stakes. Tell me all of it. Big things. I'm good.
One of my favorite things in the world about my new house is these windows that I'm sitting in front of. This is my closet, obviously. And it looks out like on the whole street. I can see the whole street from my closet and no one can see me. Oh my God. I'm like so nosy. I am so the nosy neighbor. But so they come by it naturally. And my oldest is also just like, we have a friend whose daughter is like this and she's a little bit older. And I remember her telling me that her daughter was asking about like what a word meant. And she was like, well, I'm gonna have a hard time explaining it. Let me let your dad. And she was like, no, I have to know. I have to know right now. You have to tell me. Like super intense. And she used to do that to my oldest son. And he would be like, it's so annoying because she would be like, what's wrong? What's wrong? What? I need to know. Are you okay? And he's the same way now that he's getting older. He's like, well, why can't we do that? Is it because of money? How much does it cost? And he just, and I'm like,
because you want to be honest with them, but you also don't want to like ruin their childhood bubble. But at the same time, I'm like, just accept the answer. we are in a state right now with our kids' ages. So my oldest that I grew myself is about to turn 11 and daughter is 9. I know it's weird. It's weird. We are in what I'm going to call the willful ignorance phase, where I am no longer saying, yes, Santa is real. Yes, the Easter Bunny is real. I'm doing well, what do you think? Mm-hmm. What do you think? I am not going to continuously lie to my kid. And actually, I haven't been doing that for a couple of years where it's just like our youngest just, and she'll just keep talking and just talk herself in circles. And she comes to her own conclusions all on her own. You don't even really need to be there. And my son's kind of getting to that point where he's like, well, why? And why? And he's always been a why kid. Holy cow. Like everything. Why? And he only half listens to the answer, so then I'll ask it again. And so that has just become my favorite. Like, well, what do you think? Well, why do you think that is? Well,
I think that's like the best parenting tool, because my younger son, everything you say, he's like, you say something. Hey, can you please help your sister with this? What? And I'm like, ah!
Well, it's worse when they ask the question and then they're like, wait, what?
Right. Why? And so it drives all of us insane. And so I had to tell his father and his brother to say, hey, just go, what do you think I said? What is it you think I said?
For those of you who aren't in the behavioral health fields or those who have motivational interviewing backgrounds, that's actually a therapeutic tactic to turn it around. And you stay client-based and asking, hey, well, what do you think about that? And typically the client or child in this case is going to come to their own conclusions. And it's more about how they arrive there than what the answer is. So that's yes, it's like one of those chew it over with is it a Twix? Snickers or something. Oh, yeah. Something, and they eat it in between. It's almost that pause. Like, tell me why you think that is. Doesn't matter if it's the right answer. So,
well, and I think also I recognize in my middle child something that I do as well.
You have a middle child now. Let's pause.
He's always been a middle child.
No, he was a baby.
No, he has always acted like a middle child. He has been an absolute clown from birth. So I have recognized in him something that I do, which is my husband will say something. My husband mostly, this always happens with him. He'll say something and I'll go, huh? And then I'll answer him. And I realize that I am learning a lot about retained reflexes and how I may or may not actually have ADHD and or autism, but I actually have issues with auditory processing. So it takes me time to process because things come into my ears and I have to translate it to a visual before I can then comprehend what's happening and then translate it to oral and say that. So it's like my mouth moves faster than my brain sometimes. Yep. Sometimes my brain moves faster than my body. And so I recognize in him that he is doing the same thing, which is, it's so cool watching your kids. It's cool, but also infuriating sometimes. But watching your kids like pick up these things that you also do. And it teaches you a lot about how to parent your kids because you know how your brain works. Like if my husband just tells me, like, I remember when he was gone all the time, he'd be like, okay, you have to take this to the post office and you have to mail this exactly this way. And I'd be like, no. Like, I'm going to do it my way. But if he were to say, well, you have to mail it this way because if you don't write this, this, and this, it won't get to me. And it has to be packaged like that. And then I'd be like, oh, okay. So it's like I needed to know the reasoning or else I'm going to be defiant. Right. I wish I weren't that way, but that's the way I am. And my oldest child is that way. And so I've started to recognize that in him recently. So I'm beginning to explain things instead of just being like, nah, you gotta do this.
Yeah.
God, parenting's hard.
They don't this should be the Trojan commercial. Like,
if you don't already have kids.
Do you enjoy arguing when there's no right answer? Then parenting's for you.
God, right?
Speaking of, look at all these little gray hairs that are coming in. A nice patch. Completely unrelated, I'm sure.
Oh my God. I've just started my hair has just started falling out after having her. Because, it's like 3-month mark when all your hair starts to fall out. And I'm like, oh no, all of my beautiful, luscious hair is going to be gone. I've been doing lots of things to like try to get the like a foot up on it before it starts, but we'll see.
I have barely any hair right now, and I'm working really hard to grow it back, but it all fell out. Here's a fun fact. I feel like a lot of you already know this. In times of high stress, you can lose your hair. There are many physical manifestations of what trauma looks like, how it comes out, but hair loss is one of those. And they were coming out in clumps like the kind that you see after chemotherapy there for a while. And then there's just nothing. So if you've seen my social media with like long, luscious hair and such, just know that I clipped it in that day. And I have no shame in that. Like I did not grow that myself.
Right.
It also makes doing my hair much easier because
that's true.
Curled and I just pop it in there. But I barely have any hair. Now, some of it is starting to grow back, which is very exciting. But y'all, the last year has been real friggin' stressful.
Yeah, which
real stressful.
Which is why, you know, we've addressed this on our Patreon. Yes. If you don't know, we have a Patreon. But we talked about this on our lives. Kim has had an incredibly stressful last couple of years, but especially the last year, for reasons that she's not going to disclose publicly. However, we are at a level of resolution. I am at a level of normalcy where the baby is not nursing around the clock and she will accept other people's help. And I am not just recovering all the time. I think 3-month mark, like you start to feel a little more normal.
Yeah.
So that's why we're able to be back finally.
I know. And I feel like we're here and present in a way that like we have all these other things now.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not as if they weren't always there anyway, but it feels more like, oh, hell yeah, we're back and in our groove. And like, I feel like I finally get to be me again, not the version that was robbed for the last 3, almost 4 years. And
I feel that
so like just present and grateful and happy and all of the things. And yeah, it's lovely.
And if we would have come back before right now, everyone would have been shortchanged. So thank you for being patient. Realistically, we're just slightly delayed from the jump of season 2 or season 1, I guess.
So since we've been on our break, tell me what your highlight, obviously, baby, but tell me what one of your big highlights.
I had a successful home birth. I birthed a baby in a bathtub that is right behind me.
On purpose. On purpose.
On purpose. Oh, God. I looked at my husband at one point and I was like, if I didn't love my midwife, you'd be taking me to the hospital right now and I would be begging for an epidural. For anyone who maybe somehow did not see my birth story on social, I started going into labor on Friday in the middle of the night, like Friday to Saturday.
Forever.
And she wasn't born until Monday night. So she was acyclic, I think is how you pronounce it, which is basically what causes your cervix to dilate is when the baby is descending and the top of their head hits your cervix. And then that sends the signal to your cervix to dilate. And so her head was twisted to the side and tilted. So it was kind of like the area between the top of her head and her ear was hitting my cervix. And so my cervix wasn't dilating. So I was having these contractions that were extremely intense. But they didn't stay super regular, but they were really intense. And I had them for a couple of days. And my midwife did a cervical check, which was one of the things that I had my second baby naturally. And the thing that was the worst was not the contractions. It was not pushing him out. It was none of that. It was the cervical checks. And so that was something that I didn't really want to have. So after a day and a half of, actually it's probably closer to 2 days of labor, she's like, I really want to check and see what's going on. Are you okay with that? And I was like, yeah. And so she found out that her head was tilted. And she was like, so there are some exercises you can do that can turn her around in there, but you have to do them while you're having a contraction. And I was like, but I did it because I wanted to be done. And then I essentially slammed into transition at that point. So after 2.5 days of constant contractions and essentially no rest. I slammed into transition, and I don't think I've said this like publicly necessarily. I've really only said it like in person to people. I was asked multiple times, how do you feel about how your birth went after? And I was like, to be honest, during it, I felt like a weak ass. Like I felt like a big baby, and I felt like a failure. I felt like I did a crappy job at labor, which is absolutely ridiculous. I felt like a failure because for my second labor, it was pretty uneventful. It was fairly easy, and I didn't prepare for it. This labor, I worked out through my whole pregnancy. I was doing stretches for my pelvic floor. I did all the things. I did Christian hypnobirthing. Like, I did things to prepare. And I was like expecting this labor to be like my last. And this one, let's say for every 4 contractions, I would have one where I literally was breaking and sobbing and felt like a failure. I can't do this anymore. Full on sobbing. You know, my birth team standing there, they're like, you cannot hold your breath. You need to breathe. You need to like give in to the contractions, go with them. And I couldn't breathe. And they, you know, would try to change my positions or do whatever. And I was just sobbing the entire time. And I just felt like such a failure because I thought that I was going to be able to breathe. At my follow-up appointment with my midwife, she was asking, like, how do you feel? And I was like, to be honest, I feel like a big old baby. And she said, can we tell you what our perspective was of your birth? I was like, sure, go ahead. Mm-hmm. And she said, what we saw was Kara rocking a birth and birthing a beautiful baby perfectly. And I was like, I'll accept it. It's not what I see, but I'll accept it. And maybe one day it'll be my truth. And I think it more became my truth whenever I saw the photos of my birth.
Oh,
I know.
I just
and
got
then yeah. And I was like, oh, it was something that was really powerful and amazing. And as I've been saying this, I realized that I think that translates very well to anything difficult we go through. Mm-hmm. We feel like we're freaking floundering a lot of the time. But chances are people on the outside are looking at how you're handling things and going, wow, mm-hmm. I couldn't do that. Mm-hmm. She's a freaking rock star. She's doing a great job. So all that to say, it's easier from the outside perspective to see how you did something well. And whenever I saw those photos and the video of me birthing a perfect, healthy, beautiful little girl in my home, I was like, oh, all right, I did a good job.
Fine.
Yeah.
First of all, Joe's texting me pretty
during the whole thing. Yeah.
The best friends are going to keep talking. It's fine.
Yeah, because he calls you his best friend.
Right.
Like, well, you talking to my best friend?
Yes. Obviously.
I am.
You should see our DMs back and forth to each other are very unhinged. Like
I can imagine.
Yours and mine are weird. Ours are between me and Joe are even more just like off the wall.
I can see that. I can see that being true.
Hilarious to us.
Yeah.
It's just a different brand of humor. Yeah. But he was texting me, updating me on how things are going and everything. And then it kind of stopped. I was like, ooh, that's how we know it's not
it's real.
Like, Kara's in it. And then when you sent me the video, it was like, oh, okay. And I'm like feeling all the feels and just from the outside looking in, it was, holy crap, here's this thing that was missing for all of this time. And you worked your ass off quite literally to bring to this world. And here she is. And it was.
I know. And I even think about the fitness program that I follow, Sculpt You. They have a group, you know, just like a support group on Facebook of the people that subscribe or whatever. And a lot of the people on there they're young. They're young. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a friggin' dinosaur in there. One of them was posting about having issues in her marriage and they have been together for 10 years and she doesn't feel like she's in love with them anymore. And she is thinking about getting a divorce. And one of the things she said is she feels like they've grown into 2 totally separate people. And I think back to there being a time in my marriage where things were really bad and I did not want to be married. And my husband knows this. And it was just because I was healing and he was still experiencing active trauma with his job and didn't even realize that he needed to heal anything. And so I think back to that time and how difficult it was and thinking, I don't know if I can do this. Like, we're two totally different people. And now I think, what if I hadn't stayed and I wouldn't have her?
Mm-hmm.
And I just, like, I was thinking about that this morning and I was like, I love her so much. I'm so
also
much.
Joe, but mostly her.
Yeah, no, he's aight. Kind of needy though. I love him. He's great. But that's just kind of things that I've been mulling over. And so I think a lot now and I cry a lot. Oh my God. We watched freaking Click last night and I was sobbing and I hear my oldest and I was like, are you crying? And he was like, it's really sad. And I was like, come here.
Yeah.
That movie's so freaking sad. I've not seen it somehow. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I was like, why would you want? Oh, you haven't seen it then. There you go.
Yeah. Well, they've been working their way through all of the Billy Madison movies, as they call them.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. What are your highlights? I just deboed the conversation.
I have a hard time. Well, I have no hard time talking about trauma, right? But I have a hard time when I'm recognized for something. And I know this is a highlight because it is a really great honor. I am extremely humbled. If you follow any of my social media, you may have seen I posted about receiving the Teal Heart Award from End Violence Against Women International for 2024. It is for the Outstanding Survivor Advocate of the Year. They gave me that award and I immediately am like, I don't feel worthy. And what about all of these other amazing people? Like, I don't do well with recognition. And I am starting to see that I think there are a lot of people in this space who do this work. We aren't doing it for recognition. It's for what are other people able to take away from this? What are you able to learn? How are you able to improve your life, your community? Don't focus on me necessarily. Focus on what is the story, what is the message. So that has been it's really cool. It's sitting up on my shelf. I don't know what to do with it. You can't really see it. I feel awkward.
Play that shit.
I know. So that's a highlight. I've been doing a lot of speeches this spring and consulting work. I got to go to MSU for a week right after the conference, and
you were like on the road for a while.
Yeah,
like, Cam.
I know. I have some this summer, but I've got a little bit of break. I have some cool international ones in the works, which is just like I know, it's mind blowing to me, and this is the same thing. Like I just. Like, that's a cool thing that's going to happen. And I won't, if it's something that somebody else is doing that's really cool, I will be their biggest hype person. But when
it's so weird when it's you.
No, it is. And I just feel.
That's how I felt about the movie.
Yeah. Like, I don't feel like posting about it. I'm having a hard time writing my blogs about it because I don't want to write about myself. If that makes sense. I'm like, can I just plug this into ChatGPT or something? Because this feels ick. I don't love it. But yeah, I've got to do a lot of travel and consulting, and I've just loved seeing so many different types of communities, and it's been really fun. And there's a lot more cool stuff to come that, like, we're just chugging along. I wasn't kidding when we said near the beginning of this that both of us just feel in our element and complete whole people again. It's going to be a good season, I tell you what.
Yeah. And we have just a great list of people that we are hoping to be able to bring to you. Several that we're in the process of like lining up the interviews. And one of the things that we do want to let you know about in the format of the podcast is going to change slightly is what you are hearing here. That little intro that you get in season 1 that everyone loves is just us talking and updating and talking a bit about current events. we'll just be dropping those in between episodes. And that's because I feel like there's just so much to talk about. Even we were talking on the Patreon live about something that consumed me for a week and a half, which is the Kendrick and Drake drama. And then that led to like a discussion about grooming and what even is happening in these rap battles. And then how the dissection of those looks like the way Swifties obsessively dissect everything that Taylor Swift does. So, that's the kind of thing that we tend to do a lot on Patreon lives. And I would love to do that more here just because we are actual humans. And I think that I like listening to podcasts like that. And hopefully you guys are here because you like us, not just because we have amazing guests. We do have amazing guests. I think that we're pretty good interviewers. And so hopefully you're here for those things as well as because you like us. And we like to just, hear ourselves talk. No, we don't. We don't actually like to hear ourselves talk. We just like to talk.
Really hard to edit your own voice. I will say we're going to have a lot of content experts, people who are experts in their field that are going to be coming in. So if you think of season 1 as a 100 level course, these are going to be some of those more graduated courses where you're going to get some really great information. So we do want to lighten that a little bit in between and sprinkle some of our own perspectives into current events. So you're going to hear a nice grouping of those things. And we want your feedback, as always. So whether you are leaving ratings, reviews, if you're subscribing, interacting on social media, you can always email too. I know that we've had some people who have had specific questions and we love those. So you can always email us at hello@survivorsguidetotruecrime.com. Visit the website, interact there. If you want to, join our Patreon. We love, love, love that group of people. And it's this really cool community where people are relying on each other now for some of these things. And it makes my heart so happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we tell the people on Patreon all the time, like, we are so thankful for you because they literally fund the podcast. We are not owned by a network. We are not funded by anything other than the Patreon. The Patreon funds this podcast. So, if you want to join the Patreon for bonus content and lives and special merch, things like that, that's great. But if you also want to join it because you love us and you love what we do and you want to help support the podcast and keep it going, there's a lot of kind of behind the scenes costs and things that it takes to run a podcast. Or, we want to give back to our guests that have things going on, or we want to give back to nonprofits, anything like that. We pay an editor. So there's lots of little things that we would like to do. And so the Patreon enables us to do that because everything else.
PBS brought to you by viewers like you. Brought to you by those that are just as traumatized as you. Yeah.
I saw a meme and it was like, where did my imposter syndrome start? It was like, probably watching PBS, but it was like, brought to you by viewers like you. And it's like me? I didn't do anything. That is accurate. So we just kind of want to keep you guys up to date with what's going on and all the things Kim said. And gosh, we're so happy to be back.
Yes. Well, we're really looking forward to sharing our platform with some incredible voices, maybe folks that you have not heard of before, but you're definitely going to know. But thank you. Yeah. Thank you for being here. Welcome to season 2.
Woohoo! We did it. I feel like we need like a popper thing that confetti.
Yeah. Consider this our confetti canyon. Our confetti cannon.
Woo!
Okay. Here we go.
That's it, folks. Bye.
Survivor's Guide to True Crime is hosted and executive produced by Kimberly Corbin Rourke and Kara Robinson Chamberlain.
If you love what we do here, please don't forget to follow, rate, and review the show in your podcast player. It's an easy and free way to help us and help more people find the show.
To learn more about the guests featured or to find resources and information discussed on the show, visit survivorsguidetotruecrime.com.
Thanks for listening.
Well, see you later.
Get fucked.